Welcome to the Tuesday, January 24th, 2023 regular closed session meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors. We will be holding a joint closed session with the Retirement Board on item 4 of the closed session agenda. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Director Chan.
Here.
Director Katz.
Here.
Director Lenny.
Here.
Director McIntosh.
Here.
Director Patterson. Director Young.
Here.
President Coleman.
Present. Retirement Board President Tim McGowan will now take roll call for the special meeting of the Retirement Board.
So this is a special meeting of the Retirement Board. It's being called for the purpose of conducting a joint closed session with the EBMUD Board of Directors regarding existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9A in the matter of Coleman versus EBMUD et al. I will now take roll call of the Retirement Board members. Jay Park. Present. Clifford Chan.
Present.
Margaret Young.
Present.
Elizabeth Garcetti. And we'll note that myself, Tim McGowan, is present. And with that, I'll turn it back over to President Coleman.
If members of the public are online and wish to make a public comment, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Are there any hands raised, Janetta?
There are currently no hands raised for public comment on Zoom.
Thank you. We have a speaker card from one member who is going to be granted 3 minutes each on items 1A and 4A, and that's Yvette Rivera.
So you'll have 3 minutes for each item.
May I lower the screen a little bit? Just a tad, thank you. Okay, so I've asked to speak on number 1 and 4A. The first is the Saji Pierce East Bay Mud Municipal Utility District item. I provided the district through Dana Mims copies of the Pierce versus East Bay Mud exhibits called Duffy Declaration, Pierce Declaration, Bland Declaration, Sarah Hakeem Declaration. I'm looking forward to passing out hard copies of that document to each board member today. I did email PDFs of that document, but I will provide one paragraph from that document just to give everyone a preview of how important it was for us to have that. Moreover, this is a declaration of D. Jan Duffy, and they analyzed the district's policies, procedures, and actions in investigating the Bland Pierce complaint. And she stated, under East Bay Mud's leadership failures, moreover, when the board was informed of investigatory findings, it failed to act in any meaningful way to review, analyze, or independently evaluate, much less address, or try to remedy management's failures that led to the complaints and investigations in the first place. Finally, as will be described in more detail under opinion number 1, the Board of Directors failed to undertake even a limited review and evaluation of the complainant's allegations and investigators' conclusions, make its own decisions about policy violations independent of the conclusions of external investigators. I'm going to stop there with that paragraph because, again, I'm going to provide every board member a copy, and since we're celebrating East Bay Mud's 100 years this year, you can be certain that I will be reading from these documents throughout this whole year in public meetings. The second item I wanted to, on the agenda, so I'm going to go to the next part of, thank you. And this is in regards to the John Coleman case against East Bay Mud. It's quite odd to me that, Director Coleman, you're not stepping aside during this portion of the meeting, but I did send a request for information to the district under a Public Records Act request to find out how much money was spent by EBMUD fighting this lawsuit that Director John Coleman lost in December. So I also asked for any documents that were going to be used in this portion of the meeting, and I think according to the Brown Act, I'm supposed to be provided those documents, but I didn't get any notification yet. I know that when employees file civil rights lawsuits, General Counsel is very happy to immediately inform plaintiffs that they gotta pay up. I'm wondering if that was passed along to you, Mr. Coleman, Director Coleman, and if the district is gonna make some sort of deal in a settlement so that you do not have to pay. I really hope that's not the case. I have to say, Director Coleman, that it must have been really hard to take that an East Bay MUD employee relayed incorrect information to you. Join our club. Join our club. It must have been even harder for you to see some of these employees get bonuses after your life was impacted heavily. Again, join our club. This afternoon, I will be presenting information that I hope the district really keeps its finger on the pulse of, because for too long, the district directors have held the broom that sweeps all of this stuff underneath the rug. I yield.
We will now, are there any other members of the public?
There are no hands raised for public comment.
Thank you very much. We will now convene to discuss closed session items 1 through 4. The Retirement Board will join the Board of Directors for item 4. I'll be recusing myself from participation in item 4. We're rescheduled to return to our regular meeting at 1:15. Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to the Tuesday, January 24th, 2023 regular business meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors. We will receive reports from this morning's Finance Administration Committee and fiscal years 24-25 and budget workshop under number 1 under item 15. From closed session, the board met in closed session this morning to consider a request by the General Counsel to authorize initiation on 2 related matters. All directors are present at the closed session. The directors voted to authorize the General Counsel to initiate litigation in the matters. The action, defendants, and other particulars will be disclosed upon inquiry once the actions are formally commenced. There were no other announcements from closed session. Madam Secretary, could we please have a roll call?
Director Chan? Here. Director Katz? Here. Director Linney?
Here.
Director McIntosh? Here. Director Patterson? Here. Director Young? Here. President Coleman?
Present, thank you. We now all please join so we can do the Pledge of Allegiance. I've asked Director Chan to lead it today.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Director Chan. The 2023 board assignments to committees, JPAs, and associations proposed alignments were included in your packet. After discussion, a motion will be made to vote on the required to accept the proposals. So I guess I'm looking here at the going down, but that's the first item, and then we'll go to the presentation.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Any discussion? Hearing none, are all in favor of the assigned committees? Please signify by saying aye. 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 Present? No. Abstain. It passes on a 7-0 vote. Thank you very much. I would now like to ask Clifford on the presentation.
Yes, thank you, President Coleman. So for the 17th consecutive year, the district has received the award from the Government Finance Officers Association for its annual Comprehensive Financial Report, the ACFR. The ACFR is evaluated by an impartial panel of judges to ensure it meets the high standards of the program, which includes demonstrating the spirit of transparency and full disclosure to clearly communicate its financial story and motivate potential users and user groups to read the ACFR. The Certificate of Achievement is the highest form of recognition in the area of governmental accounting and financial reporting, and its attainment represents a significant accomplishment by a government and its management. The core team responsible for the final production of the report consists of Winston Shea, Melody Wang, and Matt Hawk. These individuals demonstrate teamwork and integrity in financial reporting, which exemplifies the values of East Bay MUD. In addition to the core team, all of the accounting staff represented by Kevin Ma and various staff throughout the district provided critical information to ensure a clean audit and an award-winning report. If those from the team can stand up to receive the award.
And Director Patterson is presenting on behalf of the board.
We were just commenting that this is heavy. Well, everybody can see East Bay MUD stands for the best of the best. And in financial accounting and government, it's an honor to receive any kind of award. You have the highest award. We appreciate your service. Now, we'll get to
Thank you very much. Well deserving of the award. Now we're going to go to public comment. Is there anybody on the line for public comment?
There are currently no hands raised for public comment.
Great, thank you. That way, case, we'll then go into public comment for those who are here. When prompted, please state your name, affiliation if applicable, and topic. Please refrain from providing personal information, and we ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes, and if you need something, we'll have staff contact you. I only have one card, and that's from Yvette Rivera.
And your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you. At this morning's meeting, I mentioned that I was going to bring the Saji Pierce et al. Declarations for Ariel Bland, Duffy, Pierce, and Sarah Hashim. I also mentioned that I emailed those documents before this meeting, the night before. I read from an excerpt this morning, but I do want you to know, and I'll continue reading from that excerpt on another agenda item, but I want you to know the document that I gave you today has also the McIntosh Irving file, the file and the settlement documentation. And the settlement documentation might actually help Mr. Derry Moten figure out what type of training programs will help the underrepresented employees at the district. When Derry Moten responded to Lisa McIntosh's request for information last week, it misrepresented what I said at that board meeting. I will table my response to Mr. Moten's memo that went through Clifford Chan. It's disappointing that Director McIntosh won't take off her rose-colored glasses when it comes to responses from Derry Moten, because it's not even on the agenda today. That's all I'm going to say for this part of the meeting. Thank you.
At this point, are there any other members of the public who wish to speak?
There are no hands raised for public comment.
Thank you. We're going to now move on to the consent calendar. These are items 1 through 11. And we have members of the public who would like to speak on 1, 6, 10, 11, and 12. Does the board members want to pull any other items? Okay, it's been moved by Lisa, seconded by Doug. So the remainder items are, it's really confusing here.
2 through 5?
3, 4, 7, 8, 9, and 12 is not a consent calendar item.
And you also want 5.
Okay, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, and 11. No, 11's,
2 through 5,
Yeah.
7 through 9?
yes, thank you. I was trying to write them down. So we do have a first from Lisa and a second from Doug. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstain. Passes on a 7-0 vote. So that will move us on to item 1, and that is Yvette Rivera.
Thank you, Director Coleman. I just have a question about that line item, filing correspondence with the board. If it includes what I provided to the board before the meeting, and also if it includes, and I think the question was answered, but I'd like an official response. The letter that Derry Moten wrote through Clifford Chan, how does that get filed in any of these agendas, any of these public agendas? Does it at all? Or does it just get tucked away? That was just my question.
So Clifford, I don't know if you want to respond. These are regarding info memos. They're not filed with the board meeting packets, but they're sent to the board. They're available if people request them. And I think Robin, the secretary's office, does send it out to the whole district, the link to the info memos when we mail them out every week.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you for that. And I guess I just have to print it out and bring it to a board meeting to ask that it gets filed. I appreciate your response.
Thank you. That moves us on to item, well, should we have to vote on that? No, yes, we should vote on item 1. Is there a motion to accept?
I'll move that.
It's been moved by Doug. Is there a second? Seconded by Lisa. So motion made by Doug, seconded by Lisa. Any further discussion or anything? All right, in that case, all those in favor, please say aye. 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 It's approved on a 7-0 vote. So I'm going to be flipping pages here, folks, so excuse me. Next item is item 6, I believe.
Yes.
And that was Eric Larson.
Good afternoon, President Coleman, board members, General Manager Chan. I asked to have item number 6 pulled based on the scope. Specifically, Axiom has no authority to provide a return to work clearance for our represented members. During the district declared COVID emergency, the district was implementing COVID policy regarding exclusion of COVID cases from the workplace and quarantine and isolation recommendations. During that time, AFSCME 444 negotiated additional sick leave, and the state legislature and Congress enacted additional sick leave to account for needed employee leave time to comply with these COVID isolation and quarantine requirements. Now that's gone, and the emergency has been lifted at the district. COVID is still here, make no mistake, but it seems to be endemic and no longer an acute emergency. But the district is still making new policy without required meet and confer with the union, implementing district procedures that require stay-at-home orders if I have symptoms, and that require the employee to call a COVID hotline, which doesn't even open until 7 o'clock in the morning. Most of our 444 represented shifts start at 6, 6:30. A lot of my crew members start at 5:30. Some people are in a continuous operations situation. We can have a COVID hotline that doesn't answer phones until after 7 o'clock in the morning. I need to leave the house at 5:30. This happened to me yesterday. I woke up with a sore throat. I called the COVID hotline and got a message that they didn't open till 7. I left them a message. I had to call them back after 7. They made me produce a negative COVID test and then cleared me for work. If the district is intent on going down this course, they are required by law to provide the test kit and the time to take it. I discussed this at last board meeting, and the board contended that seemed reasonable, that the district provide the test and the time to take the test if they're going to require this for a clearance to report to work. They are also required by law to meet and confer with the union over the impacts of changes in working conditions. Policies implemented to comply with emergency standards do not constitute a status quo past practice from which to impose new policy on the basis that there is no change. Our collective bargaining agreement only requires medical clearance to return to work after 10 days. Government Code 3205 requires exclusion of COVID positive cases from the workplace, but defers to state and county for symptomatic employees, which only provide guidances and recommendations, not orders. AFSCME 444 can negotiate effectively policy that protects district employees if the district is willing to come to the table and meet and confer with us. My last response to demand to meet and confer from the director of HR was that they were under no obligation to meet and confer with us because they're going on this status quo policy that was enacted under these emergency procedures. The emergency has been rescinded. There is no more implementation. It's called a meet and confer, negotiate with the union to mitigate the impacts. Do not approve this contract award providing return to work clearance to Axiom until management has satisfied their duty to mitigate impacts to AFSCME 444 represented employees. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. Cliff? Yes, Doug.
Eric, do you have a home test kit?
Yeah, I have one that I got, that I ordered from the government. Yeah, the government will supply up to 4 a month. Kaiser will supply up to 4 a month. If I'm having to produce them every day, I'm going to run out by the end of the week, I think. If I don't have any, if I hadn't taken the time to order them from the IRS, or if I had expended them because I was visiting my family over the Christmas holidays and I didn't want, those tests are for me to protect my family, right? If the district is requiring me to provide a test kit to report to work under Government Code 3205, the employer is required to provide those tests. It's not that for me to call up the federal government and ask the federal government to send me a test kit, and then for me to produce that test to the employer so that I can come to work. It's for me to protect my community, my friends and family.
I understand that. So right now, you're unable to get a kit from your employer, EBMUD. Is that
They don't have
correct?
any. They don't have. We've been asking them since at least last summer to just stock them at the warehouse. Just order a pallet of them. I think they could have probably got FEMA reimbursement during the emergency if they had bought a pallet.
And I'm
of
just
test
trying to
kits.
understand your the example you gave. Obviously, it's not just your situation.
The example I gave, I had a test kit, but I had to, expend my test kit. Now I'm down
Right.
one test kit, right?
Right.
I have to go now to
Right.
CVS or to
And-
Kaiser to get another one.
Okay. Why were you calling the hotline, if I can help understand?
I woke up with a sore throat. That's a symptom, COVID symptom.
Is that required to contact the hotline when you wake up with?
According to the district implemented policies as of January 1st. And policies which the district has failed to meet and confer with the local over his new COVID policies. They were part of and parcel of the government regulations, which expired December 31st. We had an X-100 form that we were required to attest that we did not experience any symptoms, that we had not tested positive, that we were not around anybody. That government mandate ended as of January 1st. The district has then continued to implement that as a district policy and have told us, oh, there's no change in policy.
Right.
We're doing the same thing.
Okay, I think you've answered my question anyway.
Thank you.
I'd like to hear.
So,
Yeah.
Dave, maybe you can come up and address
Thank you
the
very much,
comments,
Eric.
but I think, specifically the comments as far as providing a test kit, or I think the requirement is provide a test kit or provide the time to get tested, which we do, and I do believe, my understanding is we have test kits. But if you can also address, Dave, the comment as far as Axiom and the requirements that still exist, even though the emergency is over, that still exist from OSHA. If you can speak to those two items, thank you.
Sure, I'll try to make it quick here. Yeah, so first of all, OSHA does right now require employers to exclude employees from the workplace who are positive or who have COVID. OSHA regulations are unclear or vague on whether if an individual is simply symptomatic, whether or not they need to be explicitly excluded from the workplace, but it has been our practice for almost 3 years now. If an employee is symptomatic and there's no other easy explanation like, they have horrible allergies or what have you, if it is plausible that they may have COVID, we have excluded that person from the workplace since the pandemic began. Nothing has changed. OSHA regulations have been modified under an emergency standard and a permanent standard, but the essence of excluding employees from the workplace has not changed. That's still very relevant today. The test kits are available. They're in the warehouse. I think we pushed out about 30 or 40 kits to about 7 work sites throughout the district, including SD1 and our service yards. So kits are available if employees want to get them. Employers are obligated to provide a test or for a test. So if an employee does go and get a test, that time is on district time. If they incur a cost, that's reimbursed. Or we could simply provide a kit, but a lot of those options are available to employees. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Doug.
Yeah, just to be clear, so we have test kits. They don't have to go to a test center or something.
Yes.
And are the test kits, when you say there's 30 or 40, I mean, are employees able to, they have to be checked out or one at a time, or how does that work?
Yeah, an employee, so they are at work sites. An employee goes to the work site. There's an individual there who basically is a caretaker of the kits. And if an employee provides some plausible rationale for obtaining the kit, they're handed one.
Plausible rationale.
Such as they're symptomatic.
Well,
or
they don't want to come to work to get the kit if
Or-
they're symptomatic.
right,
You want to have
right.
at least 1 or 2 spares at home or something.
We have not provided kits to employees on that proactive of a basis. So we have not handed employees kits in advance of any symptoms.
All right, well, I think that we should. It seems like, I mean, who am I to say? I don't really understand what the kits cost and everything, because I get them free from the government also, but I do think that we should find ways to be pretty generous in having those kits available to employees on a proactive basis, rather than having them come in when they're symptomatic or, have to go to a test center because they don't have any at home or whatever.
Yeah. But I think regardless of, like whether we try to push out, like every individual gets 1 test kit, if an employee goes to get a test, is on district time, I think up to 2 hours to get the test, and if there's any cost incurred, is reimbursed by the district.
Yes, Andy.
Yeah, I would also want to make sure that we, that all, both our staff as well as our bargaining units understand that, at least as it relates to home tests, that 2 per, depending on which employer-sponsored plan they're on, it's either 2 per week or 8 per 30 days, and those are reimbursable. It may, with some of our plans, it requires the filling out of a form, and we could make that form more available to employees, as we transition into this situation. Of course, the employer is paying for that health insurance for all of our employees, and so we should be making that reimbursement process available, whether it's our direct reimbursement, from EBMUD, or whether it's through the health insurer. There's a minimum of 2 per week or 8 per month that are available without. That just is not a question. We just need to make sure that people know how to get reimbursed so that that process goes smoother. It doesn't seem practical that we would expect somebody who detects symptoms at home to come to the district. We do not want that. We don't want that. So we want them to be accessible at home, and to not have fear of not being reimbursed be a factor. We want to make that as easy and seamless as possible. I am clear that there seems to be some miscommunication or lack of clarity of each other's positions between our management and our bargaining units. To the extent that we've had any change in policy, we would of course meet and confer if there are impacts. Given what I've just heard, I would like to hear more about where things are, and would expect that we would meet and confer about any change in policy that we're imposing. Specific to this contract that's before us, are we, do we need to renew this contract or extend the authorization of additional amounts to make sure that we can still maintain this contract over the next 2 to 4 weeks? Will we run out of money on this contract, or do we have sufficient funds under this contract to wait for an update?
I mean, Dave, and you can jump in, but I think honestly, this contract is independent of this discussion. We have a requirement by law to do contact tracing at least for the next year, I believe. And I think the issues that Eric is bringing up are related to, can everybody get a test kit versus our obligation of providing time for an employee to go get tested, and then whether or not, we need to meet and confer over the fact that, if you are symptomatic and you don't have a reason to explain those symptoms that are COVID-like, our duty to protect the employees from coming to work and potentially spreading COVID. I think this contract and the issues that Eric are independent. We have to do contact tracing.
So Andy asked whether or not we should defer or not this for 2 to 4 weeks. You're saying we shouldn't?
I'm suggesting that we move forward with this contract because this is something we have to do, but we can certainly meet with 444 to discuss the directions that we are providing Axiom to give to employees, as well as the availability of test kits, or how an employee can get tested so it's not at their own cost, which again, whether it's a test kit or what we already provide as well in time.
I'll move this item.
It's been moved by Doug. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by April.
Can I ask, and if this is just something that we will need to address with meetings with Local 444, do we on the issue of impacts of a return to work clearance, if additional reimbursement of a COVID test is needed? That's how I'm understanding the main concern. Is that something that we will be meeting with them to make sure that we have a common understanding of the mechanisms available for reimbursement?
Yeah, what I'm hearing the board ask outside of this particular item is for us to provide clarity to the unions as far as the accessibility of test kits or the time, and then also to look into whether we should provide test kits proactively to all employees versus the approach that we're taking, and then also to meet with the unions to discuss with them what we believe are the requirements that Axiom is providing to employees to either stay quarantined or isolate at home, versus what I think Eric is saying that where we have to meet and confer over. What I think he's saying is the last item is, I have symptoms I can't explain, and I'm being asked to stay at home. I think that's the item. I don't think Eric is saying if an employee has COVID, we don't have the right to tell him to stay at home.
That's correct. Thank you. You captured our concerns pretty well. We do expect to meet and confer over district policies. These policies were policies that were implemented under emergency authorizations or emergency situations. In an emergency situation, the district does have the authority to implement emergency procedures and then meet and confer with us regarding the impacts afterwards. Now we're past that emergency. There's no longer an emergency in place. The district is carrying over policies that were implemented during an emergency, and we do request to meet and confer over those new policies and the impacts of those policies, specifically the impacts of adopting guidelines for excluding symptomatic employees, which we don't want symptomatic employees to come to work. We don't want people to have a negative incentive to come to work and to mask symptoms and potentially expose people, you know, because they're being required to use their own sick leave.
Eric, so I think we have a acknowledgement from the general manager and discussion from the board that everything that you raised will be in discussion with you and the other unions, correct?
We will meet and discuss, and then once we understand the impacts and if it's necessary to go meet and confer, we will do that.
Thank you.
So we also have a motion on the table. It was moved by Doug, seconded by Andy.
April, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, it is April, sorry. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, passes on a 7-0 vote. The next item is item 10, which Yvette Rivera has requested to speak on.
Thank you, Director Coleman, and I do appreciate you navigating traffic today. I think you're doing a good job.
I'll go work for Caltrans.
So, I'm talking about number 10, because we have Alexander Coate on this list. I believe he shouldn't be on this list. I believe that if he was manning the ship when the Saji Pierce and Ariel Bland case started, he should not be on this list. I'm going to read one paragraph from the Duffy paper that says, without question, however, the most egregious example of the failure of Mr. Spencer's and Ms. Acosta's ultimately East Bay MUD's leadership in this matter is the fact that Mr. Spencer hired his own counsel to represent him during the investigation phase. I'm not going to read any more, but I'm just saying that Alex Coate should not be on this list, especially if he authorized expenditures for a private lawyer for Mr. Craig Spencer. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvette. Again, we have item 10 before us. Is there a motion to? I'll give this one to.
I'll second.
Yeah, thank you. To Marguerite. Okay. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I just have one thing, is that reminded that this is a emergency succession plan in the event of a catastrophe where we want people who know or reasonably can represent the district on a moment's notice to be making decisions in a fast-changing emergency situation when one or more of us are unable to serve. So, that's all.
Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, passes on a 7-0 vote. I'd encourage the directors who have not filled out their vacant positions to fill them out. I'd also like to remind everybody, this was started under Director Young several years ago, that when you're traveling out of the service area, you should notify the general manager, the board secretary, and myself when you're going to be, how long you're going to be gone. In the event of an emergency, so we can make sure everything is runs smoothly as possible. And I think last time I sent it to you, mine, since you're the vice president. Okay, thank you. So that moves us on now to item 11, Yvette.
I'm off. Okay, thank you, Director Coleman. One policy that I disagree that needs to be changed is the one that it's policy under performance management. I do not believe Derry Moten's group should have any responsibility with that. If you look at the Duffy report, they talk about she talks about competent, knowledgeable, impartial, and authoritative HR professionals. Please read the Duffy document. We're not going to be able to fix things at East Bay MUD if we use the same tools over and over again. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there, okay, at that point, is there a motion to move item 11?
I'll move item 11.
Doug, thank you. And was that Bill? Okay, so it's been moved by Doug and seconded by Bill. If any further discussion? Seeing, hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
I'm sorry, President Coleman, do you want to note the revision that was made that's at the places for one of the policies?
Sorry, that was my question. Let me go to it. There's one slight revision, thank you. Under policy 4.112, 1G, to remove the word avoid, and I need to find the new verbiage here. We got lots of papers. Do you have it? Oh wait, let's see. Yeah, it's on 4.12, page 1. It's 1G, the word avoid, and it says to make every reasonable effort not to contract. Yeah, it's crossed out. I gotta get stronger glasses. That was the one change that was made this morning in the Finance Committee. Thank you very much. I raised it because I thought avoid was not a strong enough word, quite frankly. And we had some discussion, and it's up to the board. The committee, after some discussion, said yes, but it's entirely up to the board whether they want to keep avoid or make every reasonable effort not to contract.
I think it's more forceful with the revision.
Okay. Any discussion on that? Again, we have a motion on the table by Doug and Bill. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, abstain. Passes on a 7-0 vote. Now this moves us to determination and discussion. If anybody is online and wishes to comment on item 12 through 14, please raise your hand. This item for discussion. When prompted, please state your name and affiliation if applicable. Are there any people online for?
There are currently no hands raised for public comment.
Thank you. And then for, again, we will, if there's anybody in the public who would like to speak on item 12, we ask that you name and keep it to 3 minutes or less. And we have one speaker, and that is Yvette Rivera.
I saw that she left the room.
Oh, okay.
Do we have a presentation on this?
I have a brief.
Okay, why don't you make the presentation? Maybe she'll reappear.
So each year, the board has the opportunity to review and adjust their compensation for themselves. The board's current monthly compensation is $1,367 per month, and it was last adjusted in 2020. The MUD Act allows an annual adjustment of not more than 5% for each calendar year following the date of the last adjustment. So what this means is that the board could adjust their salary for just 2023, or they can make an adjustment for 2021 and 2022 as well. However, each year is limited to a maximum of 5%. In the past, when the board adjusted their salary, they typically increased their salary based on the general salary increase received by staff. In 2021, that was 3%. In 2022, that was 4%. In 2023, that was 4.5%. That's the end of just my introduction. If there are any other questions.
So
Yes, Doug.
it was my memory that we deferred because we were in negotiations and we didn't want to get out ahead of the MOU for that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions or comments? I see Andy moving towards the mic.
Yeah, I do think it,
I'm sorry.
yeah, I was supportive of deferring to not get ahead of our labor negotiations. And we also deferred earlier in 2021 because we wanted to recognize what was happening during that period during the pandemic before the recovery began. I do think it makes sense for our board's compensation to keep pace with the rising cost of inflation. We want people of any type of means to be able to afford to serve in these roles. So I would propose that we have an action that does keep pace with the combined additive number for 2021, 2022, and 2023. So I would move that we increase our monthly compensation by 11.5%.
Any other questions or comments from members of the board?
Oh, yeah, let's have a second.
Okay, it's been moved by Andy to move it to 11.5% and seconded by Bill. Okay.
So I make this statement every time we have this, and Andy already alluded to it, but I do think the important thing here is that we are able to give some compensation that will encourage people who can't just do this as a hobby or as a extra sort of thing and get compensated fairly for the time that the board duties require. It is an important, obviously important position in our community to be able to provide clean water in a well-run district. And we want to have a very diverse perspective from that, or on that. And so I support keeping up with the salary increases that keeps up with inflation, that we don't fall behind.
Any other comments?
I would like to clarify for the end of the motion to reflect, to adjust for calendar years 2021, 2022, and 2023, to make it clear the basis under the MUD Act for the record.
Thank you. April, did you moving towards the mic?
Yeah, I am, I mean, I definitely agree, and I really support my colleagues who feel that an 11% increase is justified. However, this is my second meeting, and I don't feel like it's appropriate for me to weigh in on this, so I will be abstaining. It's almost like asking for a raise on your second day of work.
Any other comments? Bill?
Just to clarify, keeping abreast also helps for future as people come on to the board so that we don't lag behind. It's important to keep pace with the time. And I just wanted to reiterate that this is just bringing us up to date.
Thank you, Bill. Any other comments? Why do we have a roll call vote on this?
Okay. Director Chan, you're abstaining? Okay. Director Katz?
Yes.
Director Linney? Director McIntosh?
Yes.
Director Patterson?
Yes.
Director Young?
Yes.
President Coleman?
No. So it was approved on a 5 vote with 1 abstention and 1 no vote. That moves us on to item 13, which is to appoint a Centennial Celebration Ad Hoc Committee.
Yes, so as the board is aware, this is our centennial year. The main celebration will be coming up in May. We have updated the board on our activities a number of times as recently as last December. And there was a discussion about appointing an ad hoc committee for the district centennial celebration. At this point, I'll pass it off to President Coleman to introduce this item some more.
Great, thank you. I talked with Clifford Chan about this, and I think it's very important not only to look at what has happened, but look towards the future. And so I would like the board to consider the approval if the the Centennial Celebration, which Director Patterson would chair. It would include Lisa McIntosh and myself on the ad hoc committee.
I'd like to make a substitute motion.
Sure.
I would like to serve on the Centennial Committee instead of president.
I'll second that.
Okay. So we need to, in this case, it would be rather than myself on the committee, it would be chaired by Patterson, Directors McIntosh, and Director Young. And so that's the first. Any other discussion?
I think it makes sense to consider a new committee when the most interested board members don't overlap with an existing committee. I was just looking at our list, and this really draws from a group that does not exist in our committee structure. So that's just a consideration.
Okay. Any other comments? Substitute motion is by Director Young and second by Director Linney to include as a chair. Director Patterson, as on the committee, would be Lisa McIntosh and Marguerite Young. All those.
President Coleman.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Just for clarity, I just want to make sure, because the Centennial activities are coming up very quickly, as we had discussed, we do need to meet with this committee fairly soon. Hopefully, our goal, as we discussed, is this month to really provide a little more details on the activities and the board participation in each of the activities, so as not to delay a lot of the work that we have, the events that are coming up. So if this is approved by the board, we will be reaching out to those committee members to schedule a meeting soon.
Understood. And the board members that are listed have that availability and understand what Clifford just said about the meeting initially and the time commitment? Great.
Okay, so
Yes.
just for clarity, is there one motion on the floor right now?
The substitute motion actually supersedes. So if that passes, the other motion is no longer a motion.
Okay, and is there a possibility for 3 people to be
Well,
on
there-
that Centennial Committee?
There will be 3. It would be
I mean,
Director Patterson would chair it, Lisa and Marguerite would be the third person.
okay, but what about, if you wanted to start, would there be a possibility of 4 people on
I
that?
think that would then violate the Brown Act.
So,
Is that
yeah,
a-
so the reason for 3 is it's less than a majority.
Okay. Just
If
getting
you-
clarity, thank you.
If you would like to sit on that committee, I'd happily defer to you.
Oh, I'm good. Thank you.
So the motion stands. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstention. Passes on a 7-0 vote. Thank you. Now we move on to the general manager's report.
Yes. Thank you. So the first update is on the wet weather update. I think the board's aware we had a series of atmospheric rivers in late December and January that presented challenges for the wastewater system. Despite seeing inflows almost 13 times the average daily flows, the wastewater system did perform well. Amit Mutsudi, our wastewater director, will provide a wet weather update on the regional storm flows, the wastewater system operations, and discharges.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the board and President Coleman. Thank you for the opportunity. What I wanted to cover today is the storm during our New Year's Eve and how the wastewater system performed, the consent decree work to date, and next steps. And also, not included here, I wanted to include the media coverage and how we responded to numerous media inquiries. New Year's Eve storm was predicted to be significant. We all knew that. But when it came down, it proved to be much more stronger and longer than we anticipated. The heavy rain began in the morning and continued throughout the day as the storm kind of stalled on Oakland area and San Leandro and this area, and it just stayed for a couple of days. It like storm parked there. And if you were in the Bay Area at the time, you probably remember, the widespread flooding, down trees, power lines, landslides, road closures. There was numerous. One thing I want to also mention, prior to December 31st, there was also rain events happening. So the ground was already saturated. So as a result, the flow we've seen during this event was very, very significant. Just in comparison, I put the lines over there to show different years and the amount of flow that came into the plant. The top line is, of course, what we've seen in the December 31st event. The next big one was the January 10th one, but you could see the area under the curve. If you imagine the volume is how much more water that came into our system, just by looking at those lines. So I'm sorry for presenting all these hairy graphs. Being an engineer, I love lines and love those graphs. So bear with me. I will explain the lines. So I came from San Jose, and I thought I saw and seen the highest plant in the flows in the Bay Area plants. But when I came into EBMUD, saw is a 50 MGD plant, how much flow it can expect. Then I was told no, they have actually 3 more plants, and not just one. And then the numbers we experienced very first month of my job was 655. That was the peak flow. Now, if you see the other lines, the main wastewater treatment plant is on the brown line. That's how much water was going in there. And then the Oakport, our wet weather facility, that was the next one. And then the Point Isabel, and down below also we have San Antonio. And very little one, if you see the little hump, is the one that we had started overflowing. So in summary, we kind of
Be clear, so the little hump is which again?
overflows.
Yes, I can see that. It's the
Sanitary sewer overflows.
the sewer overflows.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to cover that in a little more
Okay.
detail.
All right.
But I just wanted to give you the magnitude
Yeah.
of the volume of water that we had to manage. This is kind of a summary of the flow numbers, and the numbers are rounded off, just to give you a refresher if you didn't want not following the curves on my previous slides. So main wastewater plant got about 325, and then Point Isabel, and between Point Isabel and 100 MGD around there, Oakport got 150, and San Antonio Creek also got 50. So kind of a refresher for those of you already familiar with it. This was definitely new for me. The wastewater collection system and wastewater treatment facilities, as well as the main wastewater treatment plant, is kind of summarized in this picture. There is the circles you see in there are the overflow structures, and the circles that I have put them in solid represents the overflow structures where we actually overflowed. So these are fail-safe. So instead of flooding the streets, it floods directly into the bay, overflows into the bay. And we have actually level monitors in these stations so we can see the system live. So right after the overflow happened, we can actually see it that the elevation at the overflow structure reaching its maximum, and it's going to overflow. And we could immediately send people to monitor and then put signs up to see what's going on. As you could see, the pictures were taken right after the overflow structures flowing. And this is another concept we have to struggle with media responses. The water you see is 13 times diluted. So it is storm runoff mostly. So the yuck factor people have that we have sanitary sewer leaking in the street it's not the same. We have our sanitary sewer system becomes a combined overflow system during a major storm like this. And then most of what you see is very diluted. Although I'm not saying it's safe, but it's just not like a raw sewage.
Some treatment at all these overflow structures?
No.
Or no, right.
Overflow structures. But I showed you in the previous slides how much we're going to the wet weather facilities, as well as the main treatment facilities. This is just a small fraction of it that overflowed instead of flooding the streets, public streets.
All right, yeah, I think that's what I'm getting confused. So the overflow, this chart here is actually what flow that didn't go through the wet weather facility.
The small hump.
Just that small hump.
Just the small hump.
So what that graph shows is
Very-
what was treated at the main
okay.
plant, what was treated at the wet weather facilities, and when those facilities can't handle it, it goes to the overflow facilities,
Right.
which is untreated.
And did we notify the regional water board with that?
Yes. There's. I will come to the response plan. So kind of explaining the overflow structures first, because you probably understand the main wastewater treatment plant where we treat the wastewater for primary, secondary, and disinfection. The wet weather facilities does the primary treatment and then disinfection, and then dechlorination. The wet weather overflow structures are structures where the water kind of, if it's hydraulically backs up when it's over capacity, it overflows with this one-way valves directly into the bay. But it doesn't let the tide water get into our system. It's like a simple. And then we have level sensors over there that warns us that we're reaching critical points. In addition to overflow structures overflowing, we also actually had overflows at the several streets as well. Small compared to all the other volumes we have been dealing with, but regardless, we did have flooding on the streets and overflowing manholes. You see some pictures in there on Berkeley 2nd Street, and then Buchanan Streets, and also in Alameda. So what we do? As soon as we find out, we were the first one to notify OES, Office of Emergency Services. We put signs up, we start collecting samples, and then we have a requirement to notify the Regional Water Quality Control Board with a 2-day report, 48 hours, and then with a 15-day, and then a formal report by 45 days. The 14-day and 48 hours reports have been already submitted. We also put advisories, signs at various locations at Barnhill Marina, the Webster Street at overflow structure near Alameda, Ellis Street overflow structure in Oakland, and then San Leandro Creek. These signs are in 4 different languages, and it basically tells people not to get into bodily contact with water. This kind of give you another pie chart, as like engineers love charts and graphs. The comparison of the water that came in at various treatment plants, our main wastewater treatment plants, and then the amount of water that got out without any treatment.
Director Young has a question.
Yeah, so on our overflow structure, I mean, that's basically equivalent to what's going out from the stormwater drains all over all over our service area, right? That are separate from are supposed to be separate from the sewer. Does the city of Oakland or the stormwater agencies, are they also posting, or because that stormwater is not clean water, it's got everything in it that went into it before it went down the storm drain.
So if the
and even more so because it's infiltrating the sewers or not infiltrating the sewers near the point of entry, but as it runs down the street, etc.
So every agency that have sanitary sewer collection systems has their own WDR, which is a waste discharge requirement, and they have requirements to post and call in for any overflow in their collection system.
I'm not talking about sewer overflows.
But storm system, no.
No.
Not that I'm
okay.
aware of.
All right. Thank you.
Andy?
I look at this pie chart, and it does seem to make the discharges look quite small, and and that it's all, there's different ways of looking at it. I mean, and the amount of raw sewage going into the bay is too much. On the other hand, if better understanding the scale of the problem helps us tailor the solutions to prevent it in the future. I'm wondering if you could contextualize the inputs to this graph, like what the time frame is for is this during the storm event, during the peak of the storm event? Is this a broader time period, storms and non-storms? This is, yeah, if you could just, I might have, okay, this is from 1 a.m. On one calendar day.
It's
okay.
around 9 a.m., started in the morning, and around 10, and then continued throughout the day. right around 3 o'clock it's off.
But the pie chart has, on slide 14, that has the treatment at the main wastewater plant, the wet weather facilities, as well as the raw discharges. So is that?
That's the volume. That's the total volume.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question is, for the volumes, what time frame did you use to calculate these volumes? Was it that period that you showed in the previous graph that
Yes.
you? Okay.
That was all handled during that same time frame.
Okay, so once discharges began, that this is the profile of our whole system.
Correct.
Okay.
And this is just the one particular storm?
Yes. And that's a very important point also to, I wanted to point out, after December 1st event, December 31st event, January continued with the many more large events. And where we had to activate our wet weather facilities, we operated without any problems. And all our wet weather facilities, as well as the main wastewater treatment plant, functioned flawlessly. And I also want to acknowledge staff effort during this time, during the holidays. As you can imagine, that people were working 24/7, which we are required to do, but all extra shift people would have to call in. We had to activate extra people in the lab, inspection, as well as operations. So everybody worked around the clock, and it was all hands on the deck. And I mean, the leadership that I have in the department and the support that I have, it's just really make me feel proud to be part of this organization.
Yeah, and I think the point of showing this pie chart is that is a day where we had the SSO. All the other days where we had the big storms, we had no SSOs. It was all handled by the plant or the wet weather facilities.
Any other questions for Matt? I just have one, again, for that overflow structure that you did notify the Regional Water Board for. Roughly about how much volume was it, do you think? It's hard to identify. And two, are we potentially liable for a fine from the Regional Water Board because of that small amount?
Yes, about amount we reported for overflow from the overflow structures as well as the manholes. It's about 4.762 million gallons from the overflow structures and about 400,000 gallons from the manholes, SSOs.
So, and are we then potentially, could we be fined by the Regional Water Board for those particular overflows?
It could,
Okay.
but we're working with them.
Okay. Yes.
On other agents, what other SSOs there were around it? I mean, I know, for instance, San Francisco has a combined system, but did they swamp their system and have, overflowed,
I do not have information on San Francisco because they have a combined system, so they are not reporting SSOs.
Oh,
But the many other facilities I have known, like San Mateo, had overflows in the streets. I just don't know the quantities. And then also Orloma had significant problems. Their entire plant got flooded. Their maximum flow they typically get in a day is 10 MGD, but when the storm event happened, I heard they got 100 MGD, but that's when the meter flatlined, and it flatlined for like 8-9 hours. So, and then their plant almost got, their main switchgear almost got flooded. And if that happened, they would have been having a really bad shape.
yeah, so part of why I ask about San Francisco is that I've been, some folks have suggested that a CSO system or a combined system is a better option for managing stormwater and sewer. Doing a combined system is a better option because everything gets treated. Well, that's true as long as the maybe true, as long as the capacity of the plant is up to the challenge. So at some point, it would be helpful to understand, I mean, not that we're going to a combined system, obviously, but just to, sort of to understand that, point of view and when it holds up and when it fails. I'm guessing that it didn't do so well on New Year's.
So maybe at a future planning committee on the wet weather update, we can just
Yeah.
share with you the
Or just an
pros and
information-
cons.
or an information memo would be fine.
Yeah, I have actually opinions about that. I could share the technical issues with combining those two.
Yes. Hazel,
Yes.
You need to push, it's pushed for you now.
Let's move closer to it. So the water that was discharged, the gray area, was that partially treated? Or was
No.
it completely untreated?
Completely untreated.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I believe not. Thank you very much for the presentation.
I'm not done yet.
Oh. I thought you were.
Yes, I wanted to cover the, very briefly, the consent decree requirement, what progress we have made so far. And the consent decree, as you are aware, it started at 2014, required us to rehab our collection systems, including all our satellite agencies, and seal up all our lateral connections, as well as a technical model that we have to run and calibrate every year based on the data we gather. So we made significant progress, and the 2022 was the first check-in with our technical report, and we demonstrated through the improvements we did and the flow model that we have, have been working on, showed about 22% reduction in inflow infiltration so far. So that is a great number, because if we didn't have that, this event would have been far worse. That 22% flow didn't come in, and we were able to seal that out. So that's one important thing to recognize. Another thing, I will come back to the media inquiries, because we had a lot of inquiries from the media about understanding the consent decree requirements, and consent decree requirements is going to kind of get rid of all the wastewater inflow infiltration into the system. So one of the important distinctions I wanted to make to them, that this consent decree program, of course, 20-year plus effort, and it is for only a design storm only. That design storm was based on 1952 event, and recorded in Oakland Airport, and that is significantly smaller than what we experienced in this storm. So on any storm larger than this, we will have to deal with all the wet weather flows through our wet weather facilities, and will continue to be used. And also, there seems to be a lot of lack of understanding between the improvements we need for various asset management infrastructures, as well as the nutrient upgrades. I had to actually educate a lot of media inquiries that they are two separate issues. Nutrient impacts we have to deal with, that's a summer issue. That's a waste strength, and we have to develop our secondary treatment process. The event that we are dealing with, and that all these things happen, it's because of a hydraulic capacity. Our collection system simply got overwhelmed. They could not handle it. And which is also another reason is, if you look at our area, watershed area, there's this much older neighborhood, and they don't have adequate storm drainage. So when you don't have adequate storm drainage, where does the water go? The water is going to find out the next easiest path. So no matter how much we line up our sewers and seal up all our laterals, it'll still find a way through the manholes if there is no drainage. So the problem is not just a sanitary sewer or SSO problem, it's actually a drainage problem. So, and then our infrastructure simply doesn't address it. And the more of these events are going to happen, and we're going to see this is not just a sewer problem. So, and also people, in the comment there, you might have seen, and we had to correct them, a lot of them, that they said we have broken pipes. So it implies that our pipes are broken and sewer is just gushing out of there. That's not it. It's buried underground. It may have leaks from water to get in, but it's not spewing sewer out in the public street. So those are something we had to really work on and educate staff. And a lot of people actually didn't know that we have these overflow structures. I'm really happy that you're asking the questions about the overflow structures. I had to explain it to many reporters what it means. And I also want to acknowledge our media team. They worked around the clock. You see all the names, all the letter channels, publications, they were all asking questions. Till today, we're responding to them. So it's been quite an experience.
Marguerite?
Yeah, I just want to put a pin in something you said a minute ago about drainage. And there's not adequate storm drains. That may be true, but is building more storm drains the answer to that problem? I would say no, it is not. Creating opportunities to hold stormwater on site so that it infiltrates slowly is the answer. May not be our responsibility, but we certainly suffer the impacts of not doing that. And I would, encourage, collaboration in our water supply side, our, complying with preventing, trying to continue to lower the amount of stormwater that's pushing its way into our sewer system, and the relevant stormwater agencies to collaboratively address those issues and help address that problem, which we're seeing many jurisdictions do, where the stormwater and the water, where all of these things are, it's the same entity. We just have this fractured, slightly fractured system that isolates us from working together on some of these issues.
You're absolutely right. That's in some of my previous work experience. We worked on hydromodification, which you can use some urban areas as a temporary storage for the stormwater to come in during this kind of rapid event, and then slowly meter it out. And that's the best solution. Then dig everything out and put new pipes in. No, absolutely, that's not going to be the best solution. But still, it remains underfunded.
Thank you. Andy?
Yeah, I want to comment separately on the media interest. I think there are some challenges communicating in a regional ecosystem because there are some similarities that are common themes all around the Bay Area of I&I, and I think that many systems are similar to ours, and that story makes sense. On the other hand, there's a lot of focus on San Francisco and their unique situation of having this combined system. Just rings so familiar to anybody who's been in downtown or some of the Bayside areas and has a sense of smell. You're aware already, storm or not, that it's a combined system. If you have a sense of smell, you know already. So sometimes so that I think is reflected in the way the regional media covers the pattern. And we do have to make that extra effort to explain with the challenges of our system and how we're working towards solutions. And but of course, right when the event is happening, we want to protect public safety as well as manage understanding about how are we being good stewards of the system in the long term. I want to comment about the community efforts and future efforts to have reductions to be on a true path towards overall compliance. I'd like to think that we're doing better in the big picture because we've made so many improvements to our system through the retrofit on resale policy that we've put into place along with our communities, and I think what's a general reduction in these events. But I may be wrong about that in terms of the data, and certainly we are facing increasing risk of atmospheric rivers that can cause this to happen more than the baseline that we understood this to be at risk when we started this program. So we need to be a bit more vigilant about what does prevention mean. I do have concerns that the repair at the point of sale will have diminishing returns and may already have diminishing returns. It may not be the best vehicle for correcting I&I. And some of the conditions, I'll share that I, almost 10 years ago, had several conversations with the members of the Oakland City Council and two different mayors of the city of Oakland in the past, and explained some of these I&I problems, explained that proactive investment in combined city-owned sewer and private sewer laterals would accelerate the reduction of I&I to help us be in compliance with bay protection mandates. And there was a lot of reticence on the part of those city council members at the time. I think perceptions about pressure on rates. They did not have a customer assistance program at the time, as they do now, And we may just understand the problem differently, and there might have been a belief that we could rely on the retrofit, the private retrofit program. I think we need to be thinking about how do we share the benefits of that kind of knowledge that we have, that doing work, you know, with private laterals simultaneously with the publicly owned sewers would be a benefit to avoid you know, excess cost. It would be a benefit to avoid the debris from having multiple construction projects at the same site, and get us into compliance faster for bay protection. So I hope that we can kind of find a way to package this and share that information with decision makers in the cities that are contributing the most to this regional problem.
Will do. Thank you.
Doug?
I wanted to go back to a statement you made just to get a better understanding. You said the design storm was significantly smaller than what the storm was. Is that right?
Correct.
Did I get that? And how did we use the design storm? Did we use, when you say design storm, that the system was designed to handle, or?
No, what I meant was in the consent decree, they used a design storm and they configured the hydraulic model and the runoff based on that small event.
I see.
That's significantly smaller than the event we experienced this December 31st.
It didn't seem small then.
But the idea is, if we get the design storm from the consent decree and all the work is done, then there would be no need to use our wet weather facilities. But it always contemplated that you can get storms bigger than the design storm, so our wet weather facilities won't go away. You still need to deal with it, but under the design storm, we should be able to handle, with all the repairs, we should be able to handle everything through our wastewater treatment plant and never have to engage the wet weather facilities. And so that's kind of the concept behind the consent decree.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board comments or questions? I would just like, from the board's perspective, thank all the staff who were out there making sure that we were in compliance as much as we could, and during a very difficult, wet and cold time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Amit. Next, we have David Briggs, our Director of Operations and Maintenance, to provide an update on our water supply, as well as the water supply conditions across the state. Dave.
Okay, thank you, Clifford. Good afternoon, President Coleman and members of the board. All right, so this last week has been calm, and we're expecting another calm week, but we all know what happened in the end of December and the first part of January. So just looking really quickly here at water production, it remains low, very low even for this time of year. We are below even last year. This January is a few percentage points lower than last January. So yes, it's been wet. Last January was very warm and dry. We're riding that water conservation momentum from last year, but still very low in water production and far below the 2005 to 2007 average, which is shown in purple there. Sophia mentioned this earlier in the workshop. That's what we're seeing now is 26% below those levels. Okay, so in the McKelvey watershed, we've seen almost an average amount of rainfall for the year. We've seen that to date so far. So we're about halfway through the water year, and we have pretty much almost a full year in terms of average of rainfall so far in snowpack. Or just about 200% of average. The average for the year is about 48 inches. We have 1 inch in the 2-week forecast. There's a forecasted wet pattern change in February. It'll be clear like it has been for about another week, but the forecasts that we're tracking are sensing a change in pattern in February. No atmospheric rivers, and the models haven't converged yet in terms of how much precipitation, but we are seeing a pattern change in about a week. Back to wet. Locally, very large numbers as well. We're approaching the average for the year as well, which is 27 inches or so. And the snowpack. We are tracking beyond the largest snowpack we've ever recorded, so we'll see how the rest of the year goes. I got a photograph from a retiree from Pardee near Caples in the Kirkwood Resort, showing me a picture of a Caltrans snow-blowing piece of equipment in what looked like the snow drifts were 3 times as high as this vehicle, just an epic amount of snow. I just got it this morning and I didn't want to cite it, but I promise I will bring it next time. But it's quite something. Okay, so not surprisingly, our numbers are very large when we look at the snowpack for average to date, so just under 250% of normal. And looking at storage, so East Bay storage, 101. That's not a typo. We're actually beyond full locally, which is why we're spilling in 3 of our reservoirs, where the reservoirs are actually surcharged and water is going over the spillway. So we're very full locally. We have room in Comanche, but that's about it. Comanche would have been full 3 times over if we weren't spilling 3,500 CFS, which is 7,000 acre-feet a day, is going over Comanche. So
Or not spilling.
well, it's not over the spillway, but
Yes.
yeah, this is a Comanche. Sorry, thanks, Clifford. This is a controlled release from Comanche. Yeah, so we're not on the spillway at Comanche, but that controlled release is 3,500 CFS. That's a lot of water every day, and we're just doing that to maintain our flood capacity. The Sierras are doing quite well. I've never seen a Southern Sierra number that large this late in the year, and you can see in the inset table to the right that what started out as a good year in early December has just gotten better and better and better, especially with that 3-week period. And by the way, that 3-week period, the Mercury News reported, I think a few days ago, that we have not recorded a 3-week period of precipitation in the Bay Area that has been that wet since Abraham Lincoln was president. And so those records are only that old in San Francisco, so I think that number is based in San Francisco. But we had quite a wet 3-week period there. But 280%, 287% of normal in the Southern Sierra. Normally they get the short end of the stick because the storms tend to track more in Northern California, but they're doing quite well. Central Sierra is doing quite well. And as I mentioned last time, these storms are benefiting the Colorado Basin as well. They are at 135% of normal, which is great news for the Colorado and for the state of California. More on the state. So even though it's been extraordinarily wet, the state, and by state I mean reservoirs in the state, both federal and state owned, they were so low going into this water year that even the epic amount of rainfall that we've seen has merely brought them back to essentially average levels, only because they were so low. They will continue to go up. The state and federal projects are being cagey right now. They normally are anyway, but extra cagey right now. But we'll start to see the federal and state allocations be announced here in the next couple of weeks, probably after the first snow survey in early February. But I think the CDP and State Water Project contractors are very much anxious for a healthy allocation this year, so we'll see what happens.
Dave, real quick, I know that we're going to talk about the drought next, but we had one January 1st storm. We had a lot of snow in the Sierras, and we had a very warm tropical AR go up there, and it was all lost, and there was a lot of flooding. There's even more snow up there now. So do we have the capacity at Comanche, if a warm AR goes into the Central Sierras, to avoid flooding in the Central Valley?
I would say we do, Director Coleman. We are doing, I'll get to it in a second. You'll see how far we are encroached, which is not very far. So if we did see a warm rain on snow event, even with 140 inches up there in our watershed, I think we'd be fine. We're being very conservative right now with our high releases.
Thank you.
And just maybe a reminder for the board, we have to maintain this flood control space, and depending on the snowpack, but let's assume the snowpack is normal, we can't actually start refilling until around mid-March. And so we have to maintain that flood control space. So to your question, yeah, if you got a warm rain on snow and you lost all that snow, or a majority of the snow that you had to release, and then you get into March, then you have an interesting situation, which I don't think will happen, but that would be an interesting situation for water supply.
Director Patterson, we're essentially passing the river flow through right now. We're matching the river flow with essentially a Comanche release. So we're not storing any water right now because we have to maintain that flood control.
Okay.
But I'll get to it in a second. The snowpack is so healthy, we'll let Mother Nature fill that reservoir when it gets warm in the spring. So just last couple slides here. We're at 45 plus inches right now. You can see that average is 48, and we have about half of the year left. So with what's in the forecast, it's really a question of how far above average we're going to be, but whether it's a little, a lot, we'll see. But we will almost certainly be above average, which we haven't been able to say in a long time. And again, this is, as we pointed out before, really the most important slide that tells you the story, although it's got a lot of colorful lines on it. The black line is our storage to date. We're about 670,000 acre feet of storage right now. We are releasing through a controlled release right now at high rate to recover that flood control capacity. I'm not showing the flood control reserve on this graphic, but we are only about 20,000 acre feet encroached into a 200,000 acre foot reserve. So not very far, and that's just growing every day because we're making progress. We'll continue to do that. We expect the last half of January to be relatively dry. And then once we get into February through the spring, the trajectory that we're going to be on depends on how wet it is. We will almost certainly be releasing water and getting back down to the flood control space. And then in May, we'll let the reservoir fill up with snowmelt. Where we end up in the end of the year, we will be at 630. It's not really a question of whether or not we're going to end the year, by year I mean water year. We will end the year at 630,000 acre feet going into the next water year. The question is how much water will we release to get down to 630? So we're in good shape. And I'll leave you with that.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a quick question about that. For San Leandro Reservoir, are we still releasing water?
We
there?
have, sorry.
Yeah, we're still releasing water from there.
We have, so there's flow on the spillway right now. It's going down every day. The water was probably 2 or 3 feet above the spillway in San Leandro Reservoir about a week ago. It's been going down every day, so flows through the golf course and into Chabot have been going down. We will probably increase releases there to get some more space in there in case it gets wet again, to protect downstream from a larger hydrograph and a larger flow.
Yeah, I'm just asking because constituents are asking me when they might be able to use that golf course again.
That is a tough question.
Okay.
There is a lot of sediment in the golf course. I've gotten a lot of reports. It's going to take a lot of work to clear it, and then we can't guarantee that the flows won't come up again until we get into April or May.
Okay, so April or May in the very least.
I would say the worst case scenario would be that it'll dry out in April or May. How much time it takes to clean up, I don't know.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Marguerite?
Yeah, my follow-on on that is I had a note from a constituent, so as we moved water through Moraga Creek into USL from Freeport operations earlier, in this year in preparation for yet another year that would look like a mirror image of this one on the graph, I guess, or almost a mirror image. Just wanted to understand what the logic of pumping so much water in before the rainy season began, and he did understand that, we couldn't have predicted what's happening right now, but just thought it was odd. And I explained to him what I took from that is that we took the water from Freeport when we could in anticipation of a repeat of another historic dry year. Obviously, that's not what's happening, but, and that's why we did it. We did it because that's when we could do it. And we did it so that we wouldn't be putting, the district's customers at further you know, hardship, if the drought continued. Is that's basically the sort of accurate
Yeah,
reflection of?
that is correct. I mean, when we take the water, we take it when it's available. All signs were pointing it was going to be a third La Nina year. Everybody was talking about a third dry year. And we always take it. We know there's a risk. It's kind of our insurance policy. If you don't take it and it's a third dry year, you're going to regret not taking it. You know, and that's just the understanding going into it.
Yeah, and we all know how difficult the transfer market was, so take it when you can get it. But the final point I would put on that, Director Young, is that as we always do during wintertime, is we bring the reservoirs down to what we call rule curve to capture those winter flows. We were even below that going into that storm event. So it was a very wet storm.
Good thing it was dry last year.
Yeah.
Doug?
So, just to be clear, this is something probably I should already know, but the 630,000 acre feet, that's the maximum we're able to carry over, right? Even though
Correct.
there's a line up here, maximum capacity, we have to start letting go.
In anticipation of the rains that come.
Yeah, that's essentially the flood control level that we need to have ready for the winter.
For the winter, okay.
By way of example, just because this is such an extraordinary year to think about this, if we had the DREAM project online, how might that adjust? This would be the type of year that we would be, our groundwater storage in the North San Joaquin Valley, we might be able to have a recharge and then allow water to flow and then claim the right to be able to recover later. What would, you know, it's an unfair question, you know, with today's circumstances on the slide, but if you happen to know any of the, you know, I think this is the kind of year that we could imagine the benefits of that program.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dave. I don't know if Mike Tognolini could respond to that either.
Well, so it's a demonstration project, so the full capacities haven't been fleshed out, but absolutely, this is the type of year where we can recharge, and I assume we will. Yes. Mike's nodding and saying yes.
Yes.
So we will do that, and then I think once that project, you know, proves its concept, we can store even more in there and extract even more in, you know, in the mirror year that Director Young was talking about.
Okay, yeah, I would look forward to I would look forward to the regular update at our water supply workshop on how we're using a year like this within the demonstration project. That sounds exciting.
Any other questions regarding water supply? That moves us, none. That moves us to drought update.
Yes, thank you, Dave. So next is our drought update, and you know, Dave painted a very promising forecast for our water supply. At the last board meeting, I did share with you how we might transition out of the drought since we are currently in a stage 2 drought. The Department of Water Resources will conduct their first snow survey at the beginning of February, and then we'll get a sense of the condition of snowpack, which will inform our runoff projections. Based on the snow survey, we'll discuss at our next board meeting, which is in February, the first board meeting in February, how we can transition from a mandatory water use reduction to a voluntary goal, stage 1, sooner than what we would typically do, which would be the second board meeting in April. But given the circumstances, it seems to make sense to have that discussion sooner. So we have a number of speakers, starting with Dave Briggs.
Okay, thank you, Clifford. And just to provide some continuity here with this presentation and the last, we're going to just show the numbers again, but this is consistent with what I just showed you with where we forecast the reservoir storage being at the end of the year. In addition to hydrology, we also need to make an assumption about demand and conservation. And so if we assume similar levels as last year, that's how we arrive at these numbers. But as I said before, it's not a question of reaching 630. It's a question of how much are we going to release to get down to 630 once we get into the fall. And I think I'm going to turn it over to, sorry, Linda.
Thanks, Dave, and good afternoon. So I'll give you a very brief update on supplemental supplies. You heard the water supply conditions. So based on our current conditions and projections, water transfers are not likely to be needed this year. However, we'll continue to focus on developing long-term partnerships and pursue future multi-year transfer agreements with potential sellers. And that list includes developing long-term water transfer programs with Placer County Water Agency, with Yuba County Water Agency, and with Sycamore Mutual Water Company. And with that brief update, I'm going to transition over to Brad Ledesma on the curtailment status.
Thank you, Linda. In July 2022, the State Water Resources Control Board readopted emergency regulations that curtailed water rights throughout the state of California. In December 6, 2022, the state board temporarily suspended those curtailments due to favorable hydrology. Now, moving forward, hearing what Dave said, obviously lots of rain, those curtailments could stay suspended. They're only in place for about a year. But if they were to be reinstated, the district does have an exception that would allow it to continue to store water in Comanche this spring. And with that, I'll turn it over to Andrew.
All right, so my update is on the excessive use penalty ordinance. So just for background, the ordinance was activated by the board back in April last year as part of our overall drought response. As you know, the reason behind the ordinance is that the state law requires us to have a system in place to discourage excessive use during droughts. And we're currently in stage 2, which requires a 10% mandatory reduction. And for a stage 2 drought, the penalty is $2 per unit of water for every unit that they use above the 66 unit as the threshold for a period of 2 months. And additionally, water agencies are legally required to provide certain information related to the customer who have violated the ordinance to individuals that request that information through the Public Record Request Act. So our goal has always been, to help customers reduce, their water use, and so we have done a lot of outreach to customers with the, history of high water use to let them know about the ordinance and share certain information about our conservation programs. In May, we sent about 13,000 courtesy letters to customers who had at least one billing period that would have exceeded the stage 2 threshold, and of course, after that, when customers have an exceedance for the first time, they would get a warning letter, as we have designed within the ordinance. And then with any customer with a second exceedance, they will receive the notice of violation on their water bill. And then they have 15 days to appeal that penalty. And along the entire process, of course, our staff is always available to assist customers who want to work with us to reduce their water use and come into compliance. Again, we are legally to provide information about customers who has violated the ordinance in accordance to the Public Record Request Act. So through December 31st of last year, we sent over 2,900 warning letters to customers who have violated the threshold. And 866 of this warning letter was sent between the month of October and December. And 103 of those warning letters were sent in the month of December. So we're not at 0, but obviously the number is getting smaller. And for the month of December, and I think you have the list in front of you, there are 183 excessive use violations. So a majority of those violations are second repeats. So, and then that's about 80% of those are repeats. 80%? 80%. Yeah, up high 70, 80%, around that range. And with that, I am going to turn it back over to Brad to talk about, actually Kelly first, talk about media interest.
Okay, we tried to have one staff member present each slide, but the math didn't quite work out there. So obviously media coverage shifted quite a lot between December and January. There's a lot less focus on water conservation, and with the declining numbers, there are fewer, a little bit less interest in the excessive use numbers, although every time a list comes out, I think that will gain some interest. Of course, in late December, early January, till today, media's been really focused on water supplies, our reservoir levels, and what this means for us. Our point is that essentially, we're pleased to see our reservoirs refilling, and every little bit counts. You know, but we are cognizant of the fact that, you know, last spring we had the driest January through March on record, and, you know, we're going to continue to monitor, you know, our system and our usage. And so we're waiting for a little bit more data and deliberation before we make a decision on the water supply status for the year. And then finally, you know, we continue to thank customers who do conserve water and save water and use water efficiently, and that permeates all of our outreach. I think now it's back to Andrew.
Thank you, Kelly.
All right, I'm back for one last slide. So obviously with all the winter rains, we love it, but we're still asking our customers to conserve. For that, in fact, we have updated our website to ask customers to turn off their irrigation during the winter time. And along with those reminders to turn off their irrigation, we also letting customers know about our Centennial, of course. You can see on the, probably get a chance to see it on the website. And we are also using this opportunity to introduce our new landscape design assistance program ahead of the springtime. So the design program is for customers who are participating in a lawn conversion program where they can get some design assistance to help with some plant selections. With that, I'm going to pass it over again to Brad to talk about the considerations for any drought stage changes.
Thank you, Andrew. Changes to the district's drought stage will consider statewide conditions. There's a Governor Newsom declared a drought emergency. That declaration and changes to those declarations will depend on upcoming snow surveys. And as Dave had shown in his previous presentation, those reservoirs, although with all that rain, basically back to average conditions, and so that will go into that sort of situation. The second condition to be considered is the local condition. You can see on this picture here on the left, this picture of district staff at Caples Lake doing a snow survey. We're going to get an updated snow survey in early February. That snow survey will allow us to do additional analysis to make a potential recommendation the board consider going to stage 1 drought, voluntary. But the final recommendation moving forward will come in the water supply availability and deficiency report that'll be presented to the board April 25th.
And so if the board decides to move from a stage 2 to stage 1 early, say in, you know, by the beginning of March to move to that period, then the April discussion, it would be going from stage 1 back to stage 0.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much.
John,
Yes, I'm sorry, Bill.
this is just an aside, a happy note. In the early 60s, when I came to work for Recreation Department in Oakland, and my assignment was at the infirmary in West Oakland, EBMUD was located in the maintenance building where we are now on Adeline. And we had our first snow trip. It's the first time kids had been outside of West Oakland to go up and see the snow. So the bus was packed. And when we got up to the snow, one of the things that happened is somebody said, "Snow." Everybody went to the side of the bus and it almost turned over. That's the fun part. I just wanted to raise that for concern.
Marguerite?
I have, I guess it's also, maybe it's also a West Oakland question. As I've been writing around following, and it relates somewhere in 14 because it's about the rain and precipitation that's happened. I mean, we all know that there are a lot more potholes around this month, and I keep seeing EBMUD signs over a number of them. And I'm wondering, I always think to myself, gee, I wonder if that's actually an EBMUD sign or just a sign that appeared out of the Oakland corporate yard and they just stuck it there. Can we get an information memo on the impact of the storms on our, below ground, I don't know, what causes potholes, right, is broken lines or just groundwater, but if I see our sign over a pothole, whether that's maybe a pot cover or something like that, I assume that's something we're sort of responsible for. So I'd just like to understand what
we'll check into
our
that, although
inventory
I suspect more likely, because we see this a lot more often, our people are using our signs, and
Yeah, that's
placing
what
it
I was-
over,
what's my
and
first
it's not
question?
East Bay Mud staff putting it over. But we'll double check to make sure that's the case, but we see a lot of people taking our signs and placing it over for other reasons, and then
44th and MLK.
we will check that location.
Clifford, you know, not only are they taking them for safety, but some of the surround where you have a metal coming up, it peels away around it, and then there's a hole, not necessarily ours, could be anybody's, but they're breathers that they have in the city. But those are the conditions that happen, and sometimes that'll fall away big enough to be a big hole, and you can break an axle or anything can happen in there. So it's important to get them covered up for safety, and I don't mind if they use a few of ours. It's not necessary.
I don't either, as long as we're fixing ours.
Okay.
I know we have one more slide for next steps.
I have a comment.
Oh, Andy? Go for it.
Yeah, so just a quick comment on messaging. Our drought messaging has been great. Our communication with the public has been responsive to that great messaging. We've really gotten the word out, and it's been effective. At this moment right now, you know, we need to be real because the season has changed and the water supply situation has changed. So while you know, it's understandable that in a typical average year, we would be very cautious about hinting a change to drought status ahead of a board deliberation. You know, we just got a report that said under the worst of circumstances, we will still be flowing down the river. So I think we need to be real about that when it comes to the board's process for examining the situation. So I don't think we should be pretending that there still is a possibility of a drought if there really isn't. And that's my. I wouldn't be emphatic if we didn't have the numbers that we just heard in the last slide, but I think that is the best way to have our message received well. But we will get, you know, some juxtaposition if there's questions about this most recent list of excessive use. We may not have any interest because just the season has changed, the story has changed. But if there is a story on it, this relates to consumption back when there was a drought, and you know we did need people to conserve as far back as September and October. And we didn't get support for our community needs when we really needed that support. So I think that the policy objective for the list that the board has with us right now still stands because we do need responsiveness out of an interest of no regrets. We never know the year that's coming ahead, and those are my suggestions for communicating. These changes, you know, from dry to wet.
Understood.
Yes, and just to be clear, what I'm hearing from the board, what I'm suggesting is that we go from a stage 2 to a stage 1, which is voluntary, and then in April, look at a stage 0. I just want to make sure I'm not hearing the board say, at the next board meeting, you would like us to bring a recommendation to go from stage 2 to stage 0. Okay.
2 to 1 takes us out of excessive use penalty, out of mandatory conservation, and into a voluntary 10% use water.
Yes, and surcharge disappears too.
And no surcharge.
Yes.
Right.
And it should be noted, the list that we did receive on the surcharges, those are still, even though we appear to be out of a drought, those are during the drought time frame, so those are still owed.
Right,
Yes.
the question is whether the next list, the people that are getting charged excessive use now.
That is a billing issue we have to work out. So for the period of time where the surcharge was in place, they would be subject to surcharge, and the period they're not wouldn't be. But we have to work out the billing issues. Okay, go ahead, Brad.
And with that, I'll turn it over to Kelly.
Okay, I think that we have covered a lot of these, but just from a messaging point of view, you know, we continue to work with the state and KUA and other groups on kind of the long-term messaging, because as you know, this climate is proving, you know, it seems like we're going to be in longer, drier, hotter periods, and so the long-term aridification is really a focus of the state and other messaging. As Andrew mentioned, we're going to maintain the winter quote drought outreach about just, not being wasteful, turning off your irrigation systems, et cetera. We just talked about the EU list, and then, evaluating the water supply more fully in February, and then the WSAD board in April.
Thank you. Are there any questions? It's been a comprehensive presentation by all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And so for the last item, last October, you might remember, we began honoring employees who hit significant milestones in their career at the district. We're certainly proud of the commitment and dedication of our employees. Today, we want to share with you employees who reached significant milestones between October and December of last year. And we have Laura Salangsang here, our Senior Human Resources Analyst, to begin this presentation.
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, I'm happy to present the names of our employees. They've received service awards, like Clifford said, from October through December of 2022. And the district values individual and collective contributions of all employees. And specifically, we recognize that employee longevity is a key factor in the district's success in serving our community with high quality water and wastewater services. So we just wanted to take this time to celebrate the employee longevity milestones, which is recognized for every 5 years of service. So we have employees listed from 5 years all the way to 45 years of service. So here are the names. And I'm happy to say personally, I've seen many names of people I had the great pleasure to work with. So I think we shall applaud this accomplishment of everybody and recognize their contributions. So thank you.
Thank you. Will we be putting these names and years of service in the Splash? The Splash, in the magazine Splash?
On splashes?
Splashes, I'm sorry.
Kelly?
Yes, these are included every other, Splashes comes out every other week, and these are always included on a rolling basis.
Okay.
So they're always there at the bottom. You should see them. And a lot of them even have pictures of people who've gotten their awards with their supervisor.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else?
That is it.
Okay, so now we're going to go on. We'll now move to the reports and director comments. Excuse me, is anybody online?
There are no hands raised for public comment.
Thank you. And so the first item is, item 15 is a report from this morning from the Finance Administration Committee. And then we'll talk about the fiscal budget workshop.
Yes, the Finance Committee met this morning, Finance and Administration. We reviewed the monthly investment transactions report. That was for both November and December, the quarterly financial reports, and very quickly moved into our opening session because we were running tight on time. Again, congratulations to both the policy revisions and to the staff of the finance of the district for the award that they received. That's my report.
Thank you very much, Bill. At this morning's workshop, staff reviewed the approach to develop the fiscal years 2024 and 2025 budget and rates, preliminary assumptions for rate increases, operating and capital priorities, and staffing. And C, then, are there any other items for consideration? Please let the general manager be aware of that. If they're that, then we're going to move on to director comments. Are there any director comments? Yes, Mr. Bill Patterson.
I attended 2 events over last weekend, and I just wanted to give a brief report. One of them was at McClymonds High School on the 13th. They honored the late Bill Russell and Paul Silas. And there was a presentation with the mayor's staff, a little bit of everybody in Oakland was there. I had the pleasure of being introduced as one of the mentors to both men. And so it was a great night. the banner was hung. The community kind of unfurled just in West Oakland. And following that on the weekend, I was sworn into the Oakland NAACP at its swearing-in ceremony in the old Warriors headquarters over the Marriott. And it was the State Secretary of State Shirley Weber did the swearing in, and it was a really outstanding event. Ex-mayor was there, along with many, many people that we had worked with over the years. I had a great time and ate a lot of food and enjoyed myself. And I represented East Bay Mud.
Thank you, Bill, for all your service to the community. Are there any other director comments? Yes. Yes.
I'll be attending this Saturday's water walk on Lafayette Reservoir. Looking forward to the first of our joint efforts with Holy H2O and celebration of the 100th anniversary.
Any other director comments? I will be skiing in our watershed on Saturday. And for historical note, and I've told this to some people, the highest recorded snowfall in the history of the United States was at Tamarack Lodge in the late 1920s. And it's not very far from our watershed.
I have a quick comment.
Yes.
Okay, so on February 25th is the water walk at Shadow Dam and Reservoir. And I just wanted to point out that that's in Castro Valley, but the street, Lake Chabot Road, that leads to Chabot Dam and Reservoir is been destroyed by the storm, and no cars can pass there. So I feel, I'm hoping that the Centennial Committee will think about possibly rescheduling that. I mean, if people from Castro Valley want to attend this event, number one, they may not know that you can access Chabot Reservoir from San Leandro, because I certainly didn't until Clifford told me. And secondarily, I think people from Castro Valley just may not attend, and that's obviously would be a bummer for considering the event is in Castro Valley. So maybe that date can be moved. I'm not sure, but I just want to let the committee know that. It's also, if people from Castro Valley even knew that they could go through Lake Chabot Road through San Leandro, that's like a 25-minute drive. It's huge. So it's a very long drive and very inconvenient.
Thank you,
But
Brett.
that road is still closed. Thank you.
Thank you for apprising everybody. Yes, Doug.
I thought I would mention, I just thought of it, I attended the swearing in for Lena Tam, our county supervisor, and it was a great, joyous event. Quite a number of people there, and I had a chance to make a few remarks and just said that East Bay Mud is very proud to have Lena on the Board of Supervisors.
Okay. Anything else? All right, the next regular meeting of the board will be held on Tuesday, February 14th, 2023 at 1:15. This meeting is now adjourned. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Marguerite. I would like to adjourn the meeting in honor of Risha Cole and her family for what she's going through. Thank you for catching me on that. The meeting is now adjourned.